Hello and welcome back to the channel, welcome back to another video. In this one it is player rankings with myself and George from Ingenuity Fantasy, which if you don't know about Ingenuity Fantasy, check them out. The link is in the description. It's ingenuityfantasy.com. All sorts of good stuff on there. Completely free website. They have a transfer wizard to help you with what players to buy. You can just put in the position you need and the price, the amount you've got to spend on that position, and it will give you a list of players in order of preference. There's match stats from Opta. There's articles from various different people about captaincy, differentials, etc. And there is the player rankings, which we'll be discussing today. Now, the player rankings are a top 10 for each category, and the categories being budget defenders, premium defenders, budget mids, premium mids, budget forwards, premium forwards. So let's get into it.
Hi guys, welcome back to the FPL player ranking series with myself and Brad. Quite a long layoff this time, quite a lot to talk about in the meantime. So as ever, we will get started with the cheap defender segment. So just want to quickly mention before we dive into any more, Huijsen, if there's one thing you know about me and Brad over the past few weeks, it is the fact that we are just, in love with this Bournemouth team. And so now Kirkez has actually gone up in price. He's moved into premium as he has passed the 5 million threshold. Huijsen is now the best option out of the Bournemouth defence if you are looking in the cheap category. I think, he gets forward, he's massive, he's a good set piece threat. So I think, if you've got under 5 million, Huijsen's probably the way to go if you want a Bournemouth defender.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, his attacking threat is crazy. The bloke's like 6'5" or something. Gets on the end of everything. I think I saw somewhere he's almost averaging like a shot a game, which for a centre back is just mental. And I think he's almost averaging a chance created every game as well. So yeah, for 4.4 million with their fixtures as well, bargain.
Yeah, completely agree. And then, so even though Palace are one of the few teams who only have 4 fixtures in the next 5 game weeks, I think Munoz has stayed high on both of our lists. And that is in no small part just down to the bloke's attacking output. He is always in the final third. He is always, trying to get in and amongst the goals. And so it's genuinely just a case that I think we can easily see Munoz in 4 fixtures outproducing a lot of guys on the list in 5 fixtures. Not least because Palace have some decent fixtures as well.
Yeah, easily. Yeah, their fixtures are so Everton at home this week, ideal. Yep. Fulham away, Villa at home, Ipswich at home. So those 4, unbelievable. He scored in the FA Cup the other day. His attacking threat's just a joke. And to be honest, Mitchell's is pretty good as well, which is the reason that he's also very high on our list despite having 4 fixtures.
Yeah, completely agree. Now, we're on to the first sort of contentious one here. So, given he has strung 3 starts together, and I think for me, it's mainly off the back of Chelsea's fixtures. I think that's the main foundation for this. They've got Brighton, who are absolutely terrible at the moment, and then they've got Villa, who are, up and down, but then they've got Southampton at home and then Leicester at home. And that is why I've brought in the man himself, Reece James. I understand Brad has quite a few concerns. I understand the entire league has quite a few concerns, but I just think, his potential ceiling with his attacking output along with those fixtures means that, he does find himself quite high for me.
Yeah, no, I get it, to be fair. I've been one of the people that just goes back to Reece James time and time again. And when he is fit, he's actually an unbelievable footballer. So, completely get it. I just don't really like the position that he's playing. It seems like he tends to drop as this third centre-back, and Cucurella. The game against West Ham the other day, Cucurella was finding himself in like a left 10 space, which firstly is weird because surely you'd want Reece James in those areas, not Cucurella. Didn't make any sense to me. Yeah, I just don't like James's position, and he's not really getting forward. Like the odd time he'll get a little bit forward and can put a cross in, but not as much as Cucurella the other side. So again, position is not great. Secondly, Chelsea do have good fixtures. There's absolutely have great fixtures. They're just a bit rubbish defensively, which isn't ideal. And also, I just am not 100% sure that Reece James will even make the 5th game in this period, like fitness-wise. especially as actually in game week 26 and game week 27, there's like a 3-day gap between their two fixtures. So, and the midweek fixture is the Southampton at home fixture, which would be the one he'd likely miss. So, yeah, I love Reece James, but I can't have him. I can't have him high in a list.
Yeah, for sure. I completely agree with you. I think for me, it's more of, it's definitely not a safe option. It's more of an upside play. So I'd say if you are finding yourself ahead in your mini leagues or, you're doing quite well, then he's probably not worth the risk. But as a potential upside play, given how attacking he can be and given what his ceiling can be, especially over this fixture run, I think that's where he's more of the play. But there are definitely way safer options than Reece James. Like a Bournemouth option. So yeah, it's definitely not a transfer that anyone should be rushed into. And then Castan, I think Castan. I mean, we've seen Fulham be a bit on and off and hard to pin down. But I think even though the FDR schedule for Fulham says that Crystal Palace is a grey game and Brighton is a grey game and Tottenham's a grey game, at the minute Brighton are playing as badly as I think I can remember them playing over the past couple of years. And then Palace and Tottenham at home are actually just great fixtures at the minute, especially for an attacking-minded defender.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, firstly, he's ridiculously cheap. He's still 4.2 million. Yeah. And secondly, he is just very attacking. Their fixtures, like you say, aren't incredible, but they're plenty good enough. I mean, Forest this week isn't ideal, but Crystal Palace at home is okay. Wolves is good. Brighton's pretty good, and Tottenham at home not that great for a clean sheet necessarily, but attacking wise could be good. So if we start to see the Fulham defence that we saw at the start of the season, which was kind of top 5 defences really, then there's definitely points in there.
Yeah, completely agree. Now, speaking of FPL trolls, so Reece James, we move on to another one. One who Brad seems to be unable to break his bondage with. Luca Dean, back in your list, but not just back in your list, back at number 3. Quite high for a man who, every second game only registers 45 minutes.
Yeah, I kind of just back his minutes, which is a weird thing to say because he does just randomly not play quite often. In fact, he didn't even play the last game. So it's a bit of an interesting one to put him in, but I just think that most of the times he hasn't played, it hasn't worked. Like they lost 2-0 against Wolves the other day. Like I just think that they kind of need to play him now. And they've got a blank in 29, but they've got a double this week, so it's still 5 fixtures. And I just kind of quite like all the fixtures, apart from Liverpool, obviously. But that's in a double game week with Ipswich at home. The rest of the fixtures are kind of alright. They're playing teams that aren't great defences, so I'd back him to get an attacking return, even if Villa don't keep a clean sheet, because at the back Villa are a bit of a mess at the moment. Yeah,
I think that's it for me. I think they just also have one too many injuries now. I think Disasi's the only fit centre back they have on the entire squad. I mean, we have to hear more about Konsa, but I just think their defence is in way too wobbly a position that I just can't really trust any sort of clean sheet potential, no matter who the opposition is. I think that's just where I land, to be honest. Which leads us on. So another debate, so almost the sort of opposite end of the spectrum of a good defence but worse fixtures, is what to do about Forest. So I understand all 4 of Forest's defenders are more than viable to own. But I think at the moment their fixtures are on the slightly slippier end. Now, me more than anyone, I absolutely love some Nico Williams. I think, we finally saw the attacking return, which I've been saying has been coming for a while, in that absolute romping. So I think, there is definitely concern over their fixtures, and that is the reason that Williams is the only one who features here, as opposed to, a Milenkovic or a Murillo, who much more rely on the defensive returns, because Williams can give you that bit at the other end.
Yeah, their fixtures are bad, to be fair. I mean, they've got Newcastle, Arsenal and City within the next 4 weeks. After that, it gets pretty good. So we will start to see these Forest defenders creeping up again. The only reason I've got Milenkovic in is is kind of a lack of other options at the moment. Again, it was similar to budget forwards like a month or so ago. A few weeks ago, we had quite a few budget defenders to be considering and talking about. I just don't think that the pool is as big at the moment. So I think if I didn't own a Forest defender, I certainly wouldn't be buying one. But I do think you can probably hold them if you've got them. I mean, there is an argument to move to a Huijsen or someone like that, but there isn't many other options to sell them for. So I just don't mind them.
Yeah. Agreed. And I think that's a key point here. I think only, if you have especially a Nico Williams, because of his price, he's absolutely not worth the transfer out, because he can easily be your fifth defender and you can rotate him back in when the fixtures get really good. And also Forest do have that ever-present chance of keeping a clean sheet even against a good team. So I definitely wouldn't transfer out Nico Williams. Murillo and Milenkovic, given their price tags, they're on the border of when you can consider it. If you're so fixed, if you're like fixtures inclined, or if you really like Bournemouth. But I think if there is anyone you can think about transferring out just at the moment for this stretch, just because of his price tag, for me personally, it just would be Ola Reina.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with that at all, to be honest. I even don't disagree with selling Milenkovic, even though he's 7th in my list. Like I say, the pool of defenders is low. So if you're going to a Huijsen or even a Castan, then I don't mind selling Milenkovic for now.
Yeah, completely agree. And now, so, I mean, we don't need to go too much into Colwell. I mean, Colwell's pretty self-explanatory. Chelsea's fixtures are quite good, and he's not actually injured. There was potential that he had a knock. But, we know exactly what Colwell is. He's part of a defence who every now and then tease you with a clean sheet and then completely struggle. So, he's back in my list for the exact same reason that, they might keep a clean sheet over their period of good fixtures. But at the same time, I just don't really trust Chelsea on the clean sheet front enough for him to make any meaningful headway. But I don't know where you stand on that. But
I don't like him as an option, to be honest. I don't really like Chelsea defence at all. So you'll notice that I haven't got any Chelsea defence in my list. I think they're just a terrible defence at the moment. I don't know. Yeah. I don't even know why either. They've got good enough players, but besides the goalkeeper, they've kind of got good enough players to be a good defence. Like Reece James, Augusto, both good. Cucurella's a pretty good left back. Colwell's not bad centre back, although he's got quite a lot of mistakes in him at the moment. Chalobah coming back has been good for them. They're just not a bad defensive team. I mean, Caicedo in front of them. They just don't keep clean sheets though, which is a serious problem.
Yeah, exactly, and that's all it. If they were a much better clean sheet team, I think you'd see him and James, even higher up our list, especially considering we've got Munoz there, who's only got 4 fixtures. But I think that leads into another key point. Quite a few FPL trolls popping up at the moment. Another one is Ait Nouri. Now, we've seen where Ait Nouri plays. We've seen how attacking he can be. I think the main issue that we all had with him was Wolves' defence being absolutely torrid. But he did have a period of time where he was making it back with a couple of assists. For those who sold him late, they were rewarded in that sense. But I think what we have seen and what we have learnt from earlier in the season is that Wolves are actually very dependable in terms of their fixture schedule. So, they had a horrible set of fixtures at the start of the season. They played badly. Then they had a good set of fixtures and they looked all right. Cunha was absolutely bagging them in. And then they've had a slightly worse one and they've been bad. But, just around the corner, they've got this really nice fixture set. So after Liverpool and Bournemouth, they've got Fulham at home, then Everton, Southampton, West Ham and Ipswich. As far as 4-game stretches get, they don't really get better than that. So I think even though, you're only looking at maybe maximum 1 clean sheet there, the amount of attacking returns and, how involved Ait Nouri is there means that I think we will see him climb up our list.
Yeah, within the next couple of weeks, I can almost guarantee he'll be top 3 in my list, just purely based on fixtures. And also, like I mentioned, the pool of defenders elsewhere isn't great. In game week 29, for example, when a lot of players blank, like the Palace guys, the Liverpool guys, the Newcastle guys, Wolves have Southampton away, so it doesn't really get much better than that in that week for starters. And like you mentioned, his positioning is just a joke. And also, as you mentioned, the fixtures for Wolves have been such a stark kind of... Like they've either had a really terrible run or they've had a really good run. There hasn't been anything in between. Their fixtures have been a bit weird in that sense. So once we've got through these next few, as you say, he will definitely be a very good option.
Yep, completely agree. And then another one, so I just wanted to touch on before we move on to premium. So someone who's been very, very sneaky surprised this season. So Brentford's clean sheet potential has been far from great. But what we do see in their next set of fixtures, they have got West Ham, Leicester, Everton, and then Villa at home. Now, granted, they're not a great clean sheet team by any stretch of the imagination, but Nathan Collins has already got 2 goals and 5 assists this season. So I think if you are looking at, so everyone's talking about Mbeumo and Wissa over this sort of stretch of fixtures. If there was, any sort of Brentford defender you were going to go for, Collins has actually showed some serious capacity to return this season.
Yeah, attacking threat wise, he's been the one in terms of defenders for Brentford. I don't know, I haven't really looked at his underlying, so I don't know whether that is actually just random goals or whether there is actually genuine kind of prolonged threat there. But either way, he's cheap and they've got good fixtures, so yeah, I don't mind it.
Yeah, I think his underlyings aren't bad by any stretch. He's gone on 3.3 expected assists, 1.2 expected goals. Sorry, 3.3 expected goals this season. Expected goal involvements this season. And he's slightly exceeded them, but his underlyings are just quite good. I think the main problem is it's just not the Brentford way to keep clean sheets. They will just absolutely send it up the other end. Their philosophy is we're going to score more goals than you, and I think that philosophy alone just means that from a defensive standpoint, I wouldn't really trust any of them. But potential sneaky option given the fixtures. And now, so premium defenders. So you'll see last week, because of the Liverpool double, we did have them all above the Arsenal assets. Now both teams have 5 fixtures each within the upcoming 5 game weeks. You will see that begin to even out a bit. And you will also see the price rise of Kirkes, which now has slotted him into 7 on both of our lists. But I mean, let's just quickly talk about him. So as far as Kirkes, so we said last week, he's an absolute, if you're thinking of any Bournemouth defender, given the difference in price between him and Huijsen, which way would you lean if you could only get one of them in?
If it didn't affect other moves, I'd get Kirkes. I mean, it's 0.6 difference, which is quite a lot especially when we've got kind of assistant managerships in play potentially. Like that 0.6 could be a manager. So you could need those funds, but if you don't, then Kirkes is considerably better, I'd say. And he's a long-term hold as well. That the fixtures are good for like 10 game weeks, to be honest. They're playing game week 29, there's no issue there. So you can hold him for a very long time, which is kind of needed when there's other transfers being used on doubles and blanks, etc.
Yeah, completely agree. Now, another one we want to talk about. So Anthony Robinson, I think he's on 10 assists for the season now, which is, I believe, 3 or 4 ahead of the second highest defender. So I think, we spoke about Castan's fixtures earlier in the season being fantastic, especially for, defenders with a more attacking inclination. So Robinson, I think, is going to be another great beneficiary of that. So absolutely, my advice would be, if you have Robinson right now, he's absolutely a hold. And yeah, I can't see any reason to transfer Robinson out.
Yeah, I wouldn't be getting rid of him at all. I mean, their fixtures are pretty good. He has got some very lucky assists, I will say that. Like, there was a game, I can't remember when, it was a few game weeks ago when he got 2 assists in the game and they were both very, very lucky. But the amount of balls that he puts in every week, he kind of almost... He's putting himself in positions to get lucky. He's whipping in ridiculous amount of balls every game. So, yeah, you should definitely keep him if you own him.
Yeah. And then the final one. So I mean, Brad hasn't got Robertson at all. I've got Robertson at 10. The reason I've got Robertson, obviously Liverpool have a great defence. For me, I just can't trust his minutes. I think it is probably his position to lose, but I just think if there's any Liverpool player who I'm wary about being subject to rotation, it is quite heavily Robertson, and I think that's probably why he's out of your list, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I don't think he'll play all of the next 5 games, especially, I mean, when Tsimikas isn't fit, then he has to play all the games, but Robertson's been pretty bad this season, so I think when Tsimikas is fit, we won't see Robertson playing every game. Yep,
completely agree. So that rounds out the defenders segment. If you want to let us know what you think of our lists, let us know if there's any players that you think we missed, and we will see you again shortly for the midfielders. Right, welcome back to the midfielder segment, and we will get started again with another Bournemouth player, or Bournemouth players even. So Kluivert, Dango and Semenyo. I think the best way to approach this conversation will just probably be what ranks we have them, what order we have them in. So naturally, as you can see, I've got Kluivert and then Dango and Semenyo. That is in no small part just down to, I think, there will be weeks where one of them will go off, 2 of them might not, 1 week where 2 of them go off and 1 of them might not. But I think Kluivert in that sense, when you're measuring up against players on the same team as you, I think the presence on penalties is never more important than when you're being weighed up against another identical option on your team. So I think the penalty insurance for me is why he keeps the 1 spot.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, firstly, all 3 of them are fantastic. Absolutely brilliant options. There's nothing, they're all unbelievable, so there's really not much between them either. I wouldn't say don't get one of them because another one's better. They're all just really, really good. So for me, I've got Utara top, Semenyo second and Kluivert third. Now, I'm usually Mr. Penalties, don't get me wrong, but for me, Kluivert's minutes I just don't think are great. I mean, the last couple have been a little bit better, but typically we haven't seen Kluivert play 90 minutes much at all, and I think that will get slightly worse now as well. Now that Tavernier's back, now that Sinisterra's back, I would be surprised if Kluivert makes 90 minutes every week, whereas Semenyo does just play 90 minutes most weeks or 85 plus. I think Dango will also get more minutes than Kluivert, and he's playing up front, so that's a good thing. I mean, Jefferson's the only option, I believe, to play up front, apart from maybe Semenyo or something. So for me, it's just a minutes thing. I think Dango playing up front is just too good to kind of ignore. If I was buying one this week, obviously that's why I've got him at number 1, but I'd go Dango. The one thing to note is that I would potentially have a little bit more of a delve to see when Unai and Evan Nilsson are back, because I am not 100% sure when they are back. If you're looking at these for kind of long-term picks, then you could go for Semenyo or Kluivert based on that. I mean, their fixtures are good for like 10 game weeks, but I don't know whether one of the strikers is going to be back within that time. And then Semenyo, I mean, I've had Semenyo on my team for a long time now, just because the amount of shots he takes is ridiculous. I haven't looked at it recently, but for most of the season, he's been second behind Haaland for shots taken in the whole league. So if you're taking that many shots, a lot of them, granted, aren't the best quality shots, but if you're taking that many shots, you're going to score goals, and he's involved in most things that happen in that Bournemouth attack.
Yeah, I think another key thing about Semenyo is, we saw Semenyo take a pen in the cup game as well. So, if Kluivert is rotated out, he is the next guy up. And also, even Semenyo's presence alone in that cup games just speaks to his talismanic presence within that Bournemouth team. He's the guy who absolutely will not get rotated out. Whereas, Dango and Kluivert, I think they're both at risk of rotation, but I just think the way both of them are playing at the moment, Iraola would be silly to mess with it, or even hook either of them around 50 or 60 minutes. So I'm personally not as worried as you are about their minutes. Semenyo So I mean, that's that's why I've got them. That's why I've got them in the order I have. But I think what's important to note is, do not be afraid to own two of them. I think, given Bournemouth's upcoming fixtures, there's every chance that they will put 3 or 4 past quite a few of those teams. And in which case, owning 1 or 2, don't think about, does this person cover that person? They will all. I'll be shocked if they're not all involved in quite a few goals. So do not hesitate to have 2 of them in your team, especially considering how much funds it can free up, for other areas of the pitch. Just get them in if you can. I also think it's not worth, if you have one of them already, it's not worth switching to another one just because they all have such a high chance of scoring. It would be a waste of a transfer in my eyes, and I'm sure Brad would agree.
Yeah, completely agree with that. None of them are that much better than another one for it to be worth a transfer at all. They're very, very close to each other in how good they all are.
Yeah. Completely agree. And then, so that leads us on to Madueke. For me, I think the only reason he's here for me, he has strung together quite a few starts in a row now. I think he started the last 4 games, but his underlying numbers are the reason he's here for me, and that is a testament to how attacking and direct he is. So over the period of the last 4 games, he had 0.99 XGI against City, 1.52 against Wolves, 0.47 against Bournemouth. So those figures are pretty damn good, particularly for a winger. Granted, against West Ham he was a bit stickier, as Brad has informed me, but I just think 4 starts in a row, pretty good attack with those fixtures. Those are the reasons he's there for me, but completely understand there is a slight risk of rotation.
Yeah, I think it's more than slight as well. I mean, this could be biased because I was at the Chelsea West Ham game and was sat very close to him at points, but I just don't get him. He's a very, very, very good footballer, don't get me wrong, but then it seems like he'll have a good game, score a goal, and then that means that next week he starts thinking he's Messi and doesn't have to do anything. His attitude's just a mess. I don't really get it. So I feel like he should be rotated. Whether he is rotated or not, I don't know. But I feel like he should be because, again, in the game against West Ham, he was probably the worst player on the pitch. And then Neto came on and was unbelievable. So I don't really get why Neto isn't starting over Madueke, but clearly, I mean, he is a good footballer. I just don't. Most games you just don't get to see that, annoyingly.
Yeah, I guess in that sense, it's not an urgent rush in. I think for me, it's just also, he wouldn't be this high if Chelsea's fixtures weren't that good either. So that's part of why. But yeah, I completely understand there's a lot of risk attached to him. So by no means a must get. And then, so also one thing that has stirred up the list in that sense. So Martinelli picked up an injury the other day. Now, it's worth mentioning, me and Brad are at a point of information upon when we've recorded where it seems like the early prognosis is going to be 3 to 4 weeks. By the time of release, there may be more information available. But what that does do for our lists in the meantime is it means that Trossard, who was pretty much a starter anyway, is now as close to nailed as it gets, at least over that time period. But also we see Nwaneri enter the list. Now, I personally think Nwaneri is a better footballer than Trossard. I think he's absolutely brilliant. I'm very excited by him. But from a fantasy perspective and from just an output perspective, I think Trossard definitely presents himself as the more reliable option. If you are going to go, Arsenal for that stretch.
Yeah, probably just for minutes as well. I mean, if you're getting early subs, it'll most likely be Nwaneri that comes off, although I don't really know who, other than Sterling maybe, I'm not sure who would take minutes off of either of them out wide at the moment. One thing to note, like you said, is that we don't know how long Martinelli's out. There's a point to note about Saka. I think Saka is due back at some point within this next 5 game week span, so it's worth noting that. But in terms of Arsenal's fixtures, the next 2 are the best fixtures out of the 5. It's Leicester away, West Ham at home, then it gets a bit more tough. So you'd imagine that Trossard and Ranieri will get the bulk of the minutes within these next two, which are the two you want them for anyway. So, yeah.
Yeah, completely fair. So just a little bit of risk, but yeah, overall pretty good options, especially at their price points and the team they play for. And speaking of good teams for players to play for, so Szoboszlai, at first I was a bit hesitant about his minutes, but it looks like that position is, now his to lose. Obviously we nothing more needs to be said about Liverpool in the attacking sense. We all know exactly what entity they are, but his underlying numbers for me during that stretch have just been fantastic. Against Bournemouth he had a 0.79, against Ipswich he had a 0.71, and that was only within a 67-minute span. And then he had a 0.47 and a 0.45 against Forest and Brentford, respectively. So we are seeing him, much more in and around those production figures, much more in and around the goals than, we had seen him at other periods. But also the minutes look really good. So granted, he does take up a Liverpool transfer, which I understand will be a lot of hesitancy for people. But I think, that aside, at his price point, that the attack is part of, and the where he plays, I think he just could be a good option, especially as a differential.
Yeah, I can't imagine there's many people that are in a situation where they could or want to buy Szoboszlai, given that people have potentially got Slot as their assistant manager, or just Gakpo, Trent, Salah, or another defender, Alisson potentially. But regardless, Szoboszlai, and again, the thing is, he will very rarely get 90 minutes just because Liverpool do have other good options in that role. So someone like Curtis Jones will usually come on and get minutes. But I do think Szoboszlai will start most games, and every time he plays, he's very, very good. So I don't think there's much more to say about him than that. He's probably not a transfer in, but he's still a very good option.
Yeah, I think that's exactly where I stand on it as well. So now on to the premium mid section. I think one thing that we just have to note quickly, just a quick pre-qualification, because you can see on our list, Gordon is down at the number 9 spot. Now that is in no small part because Newcastle are one of the teams who only have 4 fixtures in the next 5 game weeks, as opposed to most of the Premier League who have 5. But it's also worth mentioning that even amongst those 4 fixtures, Newcastle's fixtures aren't the best. They are still a very, very tricky set of 4 fixtures as well. So I think, even though, as a Newcastle fan, I think he's a great player and I think his capacity to return is absolutely there, he's definitely not someone you should consider bringing in, given that confirmed blank.
Yeah, I agree. I wouldn't be buying him right now for sure. I mean, it does slightly depend on your chip strategy. If you're going to say free hit in Game Week 29, then it matters a bit less, because Newcastle's fixtures after Game Week 29 are very good. But, regardless, I wouldn't be buying him. If you own him, you could potentially hold him through if you are free hitting. But, he's definitely not a buy.
Yeah, completely agree. And then it's just, not a huge amount to talk about. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory, this list. Everyone's very familiar with the assets. But we will just talk briefly about Luis Diaz. So, because I understand, a few people, obviously Liverpool assets at the moment are quite a big topic of conversation. But, so you're, given where Diaz is on your list, you don't think Diaz is in line for nearly as much minutes as other people may think?
No, I don't, to be honest. I mean, we know that Darwin's fit and is performing slightly better than he was before at the moment. We know that Jota is kind of getting himself back to fitness as well. It's not like Diaz needs to play. I mean, Gakpo is clearly the preferred choice at left wing. So, I just don't think... admittedly, he does have 5 fixtures, but I would be quite surprised if he actually got more minutes than Gordon, who has less fixtures, to be honest.
Yeah, fair. That rounds out the midfielders segment. Let us know what you think of our lists. Let us know if there's anyone you think we missed, and we'll see you again for the forwards. All right, welcome back to the forward segment. Starting off with cheap forwards. Now, cheap forwards are interesting because there's kind of, I think the way we can look at it is three tiers. So there's Wissa kind of in a tier by himself, and then there's Raul, Cunha, João Pedro in that next sort of tier, and then the rest you probably should not even be considering. So we'll start off with Wissa. I think that's in no small part. If you've been watching the rest of the videos this series, you'll have seen how much I love Wissa, and recently how much me and Brad have loved Wissa. I think Brentford's fixtures are just fantastic. So I think he's the only one on this list at the moment who, should actually be in decent consideration to be brought into people's teams. And yeah, I think his underlying numbers have just been great all season, to be honest. So yeah, what are your thoughts on Wissa as a potential transfer in?
There's not much to say about him. The fixtures are great. He's great. He just gobbles up XG, gobbles up big chances. There really isn't much to say about him. He's just brilliant. If you are looking, which I get that a lot of people aren't in a position where they can buy Wissa right now just because there's double game weeks going on and things like that. But if you are in a world where you do need a striker and you've got that amount of money, he's the clear choice.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think what he does is he presents a good option. If you've got if you're slightly more worried about a Watkins or a Wood or an Isak, or these players are in you've taking up quite a chunk of money, these forward slots at the moment. So if you were looking for a cheap version in order to accommodate elsewhere on the pitch, I think Wissa is head and shoulders the best option there. Which leads us on to the Raul, Cunha, João Pedro debate. So earlier on in the season, me and Brad have shown a lot of love to João Pedro. He had a couple of good returns in the middle. For me, I just think Brighton just cannot really be trusted at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it would get better with Welbeck being back, because João Pedro as 9 just really wasn't working. And then it was much better when Welbeck was 9, João Pedro was deeper. But even that really hasn't worked. And to be honest, I'm now worried about João Pedro's minutes as well. I mean, we saw in the FA Cup the other day, he didn't start. I'm pretty sure he didn't start. But it was almost a pretty strong first team. So I do think his minutes are a bit of a worry. And even if his minutes aren't a bit of a worry, Brighton really aren't at it right now.
Yeah, Brighton themselves are a bit of a worry in that sense. And then, so, we spoke earlier about Aït-Nouri's fixtures and, that potential, sea of green that Wolves have coming up. And I think that's why we see Cunha, at the point he is in our list. I mean, we know exactly what Cunha can do. He can be absolutely explosive, but Wolves are a team who just traditionally have been at the mercy of their fixtures. So, their next two are not the best, to put it nicely. They've got Liverpool and Bournemouth both away, who are playing fantastic at the moment. But then they have Fulham at home, then Everton, Southampton, West Ham, and Ipswich, which we all know what Cunha can do against lesser opposition. So that could get. I think that will be a period of time where we'll see a lot of managers prioritising bringing Cunha back in.
Yeah, absolutely. In a couple of weeks, he will potentially be number 1 on my list. In no small part as well, due to the fact that in game week 29, as I mentioned earlier, Wolves play Southampton. So if you're getting rid of a player who doesn't play in game week 29, then an obvious replacement is Cunha with those fixtures. So yeah, in a couple of weeks, he'll be right up there.
Yeah, I think that's game week 28. If you're able to get him in for game week 28 against Everton, then that is absolutely something you should look at. But if not, game week 29 is as good as any to get Cunha in, because as Brad mentioned, you have those players who will be blanking that week. And then Raul. So Raul seems to have shaken off the minute bug, that he was suffering from earlier in the season. I don't know. Obviously not from a full 90 perspective, but I mean the starting spot seems to be his at least. Whereas he went through a bit of a tumultuous time earlier in the season. He was getting rotated in for Munoz. But I think we're now seeing Fulham's next 5 fixtures for me and Raul's definitive starting role means that he sees number 2 on my list.
Yeah, he's number 3 on my list, but I don't really like him as an option. It's more that the other options are just worse than him. I don't think his minutes are good, to be honest. I mean, the last 3, he hasn't played more than 72 minutes in any of them. And it wouldn't surprise me one bit if Muniz started 1 or 2 of the next 5 games. So I actually don't think his minutes are great, personally, and I wouldn't be buying him. But if you've got him, it's actually kind of a tough sell. 1, because of his price and the lack of other options at that price. And 2, because their fixtures are all right. So it's a difficult situation if you own him, but I wouldn't be buying him.
Yeah, I agree. So, I mean, definitely not worth a buy. I just think, if you are going to buy in and around this price range and you've got someone like Wissa sitting right there, you just got to make that work. But like I said, like we spoke earlier about Fulham's fixtures, I think Palace at home, then Wolves, then Brighton, then Tottenham at home, I think is a great set of fixtures. So if he was a sell, now probably not the time, but he's definitely not a buy either. So probably wouldn't move too much on him. And then that leads us nicely. So we will have a session now where we will coronate Brad on his Beto and Ndai selections. I don't remember seeing many other people who brought in Beto for that double or took that risk. But I mean, Beto played absolutely brilliantly. And to be honest, given the fixture was about Leicester, we probably should have trusted that decision a bit more. But yeah, so got to give Brad his flowers on that one.
Less than 1% owned in the game as a total. Now, it was. I actually watched the game and he was unbelievable, to be fair, and I'm actually tempted to keep him now. The idea of me bringing him in was to bring him in for this double game week and then sell him. I was in a weird situation where I needed a really cheap striker for 1 week, which I did have the option of getting Wissa, but I thought I'll just go Beto. Beto's long-term minutes don't look great because Calvert-Lewin will be back at some point. Whereas I only needed a striker for 1 week. I knew he was going to play that game against Leicester. And he was just very good. I actually sold Gakpo to get Beto. It was a weird situation in my team where it made sense. But currently it's worked out. Albeit we are yet to see the Liverpool-Everton game. So it could look a bit more stupid after that game has happened.
But, I mean, very tricky to argue with the initial results. But I think the key point there, or the main beneficiary, the main sort of benefit of bringing Beto in for that game week is, as you say, that super low ownership. Given that he had a double game week, I think, if anything, more people trusted Ndai. As, they're like, oh, well, in order to cover Everton's attack, it's got to go through Ndai. And I think a lot of people slept on Beto. And so I think in that sense, credit where it's due. And then, so, I mean, the rest of the list is kind of the word I'm going to call it is uninspiring. There was a period earlier in the season where cheap forwards were all the rage, but lots of people even had, Delaps or Welbecks. There was so many options flying around. But we're at the point now where I've got Evan Ferguson at 10 and Brad has Højlund at 10, which is a testament to the rest of the price range. Evan Ferguson, I just think, why not? I mean, West Ham have clearly brought him in. The rest of their striking options are, Bad is putting it generously. And, I just think Ferguson's not a bad player. But by no means, should you touch Ferguson or Højlund with a barge pole at the moment. Just don't go near the pair of them.
Yeah.
But then, that leads us on to premium forwards, where I think there is slightly more to talk about, given the rest of the list. So the first talking point, I think, to touch on will be Ollie Watkins. Now, the Duran sale, if there's one person on the entire planet who has benefited from the Duran sale, it is Ollie Watkins. So, I mean, the Premier League is probably not great. I mean, his own, the football he's going to be playing, probably not great. Financially, he'll be fine. But yeah, Ollie Watkins is now pretty much nailed. Injury, obviously there are injury concerns at the moment, so we do need to caveat it by talking about that. But let's assume that Watkins doesn't have any injury concerns. A great option for the next few weeks.
Double game week this week, or game week 25 of Ipswich at home and Liverpool at home. After that, the fixtures on the kind of FPL rating don't look great. It's Chelsea at home. It's classed as a red fixture, but for a striker, I don't think that's a red fixture.
Yeah.
Crystal Palace, Brentford, neither defence is particularly great. So I think he's good. Obviously, if you're going to get him, have a plan for game week 29 because he doesn't have a fixture. But yeah, in general, over the next 5 game weeks, he plays 5 games. He should start all of them if he's fit. I mean, Marlon has been the one that's played up front when he hasn't been on the pitch. I didn't actually see where Rashford came on the other day. I don't know whether he came on the left or up front, but to be honest, Watkins will get the bulk of the minutes up front regardless, I think.
Yeah, I think even with the transfer they brought in, they haven't brought in, someone that I think is going to threaten Watkins' starting credentials there. So, they've brought in a load of fill in sort of guys, albeit great options, but none of them seem like they're going to trouble Watkins' specific role within the team. And then so Jackson's another. He's always interesting to talk about Jackson because I know he seems to blow hot and cold. He seems to be like the Marmite of FPL. That's the best way I can describe him. Some people hate the fact that he gets all of these chances and doesn't seem clinical, and then others are in love with the fact he seems to get them and always be in and around the area. So it's always interesting to see where people land on Jackson in that sense. I've got him slightly high this week just because I love Chelsea's fixtures. I think Brighton, Southampton and Leicester is as good as it gets. And so, but it's hard to justify, given there's a lot of people are probably having to do some patchwork ahead of the blank game week or some adjusting after the double game week. It's hard to imagine a direct transfer, a situation where someone's using a direct transfer to him.
Yeah, I agree. I can't think of a situation where you'd buy him right now. But I'm in the camp that I think he's brilliant. I don't think many other strikers can get as many chances as he does. He's very, very good at getting chances, which not all strikers can do. Yes, his finishing most of the time is a bit of a mess, but that's much easier to fix than not getting any chances. The worry I've got is that he did seem to potentially go off with an injury against West Ham, and even without that injury, I do think his minutes are a little bit shaky right now. So that is one thing to look at. But yeah, I do think if Wood had better fixtures, there's no question that Wood would be ahead of him, basically.
Yeah, and so which leads us on to Wood actually. So it's interesting to see where people land on Wood. So Forest at the moment, I mean, especially off the back of a 7-0 drumming, their attack to put it generously is absolutely flying. So they are as good as from an asset perspective. They are absolutely loaded with attacking assets, whether it's Elanga, Wood, Gibbs, White. I think all three are great pieces. I think Wood. One key thing that I remember about Wood is everyone's like, this Liverpool fixture was meant to be the fixture that Chris Wood came back down to earth on, and he still managed to bag there and get 3 bonus points. So I can just never decide if Nottingham Forest are fixture proof or if they aren't, and it makes it very tricky to place Wood.
Yeah, I mean, their next 3 fixtures, Fulham away, Newcastle away, Arsenal away, those 3 teams are in the top 5 for XGC this season. So, and then it's City after that, who, granted, haven't been great this season, but potentially could turn it around. We don't know. Either way, the fixtures are almost as bad as it could get. So, if there is a time when Forest will become a problem, then it's now. But it's very tough to. It's very tough to. Yeah. I don't think I'd ever suggest anybody sells Chris Wood right now, just because they're just playing too good.
Yeah, he's just made a habit of proving people who haven't had confidence in him wrong. I think a couple of weeks ago there was quite a big exodus for Chris Wood. Quite a few people brought him out. They're like, right, okay, this is the week to sell him, and then he comes back the next week and bangs a hat trick. So I absolutely will refuse to tell anyone to sell Wood. Wasting a transfer on him, especially while Forest are playing this well. Fixtures be damned.
I wouldn't buy him right now, though, is one thing I would say.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, there's quite a few players coming into that don't buy, don't sell category. I think now more than ever. I just think given the doubles and the blanks, there's just other areas of your team that you need to be addressing rather than doing straight 1-for-1s on punts. So yeah, I definitely wouldn't buy him, but I definitely wouldn't sell him either. And then, so Gakpo is another one that we have a bit of disagreement on. So I personally quite like Gakpo. I think he's a great option. I think, plays for one of the best attacks in the league. Granted, they do have a blank game week in 29, but they do also have a double game week in 25, and one of those is against Wolves. So I think Gakpo, for me, remains a strong option, and I definitely won't be moving on from him personally.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned I sold Gakpo last week. That wasn't... Actually, weirdly, I bought him the week before, so I got his, whatever it was... How many points did he get? I got his 16-pointer and then sold him. I only owned him for 1 week, but that was just a weird situation where it worked for my team. I think that, obviously, if you've got Gakpo, you keep him for this week unless you need to free up a slot to get an assistant manager. But given... When he had more fixtures than everyone else, then he was much higher up the list. I'm just not sure I can put someone who, firstly, isn't on penalties, secondly, almost never gets 90 minutes. I'm not sure they can be up there with someone who gets 90 minutes, is on penalties, plays up front rather than on the wing. That's all it is for me. But again, it's a weird situation where if you've got Gakpo, you obviously don't sell him right now.
I think it's perfectly valid in that sense. And yeah, as you say, he's another player who again falls into that don't buy, don't sell category. And I think it's important. A lot of the don't buy, don't sell mantra at the moment is dictated by that blank game week where quite a few key teams are blanking. So you probably do want to save transfers for that week and just see how things shake out. I
do think,
for now. So
I do think you could buy him though. Just because there is a double in game week 25. So
for this week until Southampton.
This week, technically he's a buy, but only because of the double, I'd say.
Yeah, I think if you're looking at a 4-week rental and you've got a transfer to spend on a 4-week period, then given it's Wolves, Villa, City, Newcastle, and Southampton, I think you are looking at a good buy option. But yeah, you just do need to brace yourself to. For that blank in 29. But yeah, you're right. Actually, it's a good point. If you are looking to buy him, now is a good time actually. And then another key point that we want to talk about. So Isak has slipped down our lists. That is only because of Newcastle's blank in 29. So they do only have 4 fixtures, and they are also against City, Forest, and Liverpool. So I think now is not the time to buy Isak. But me personally, just given how good he is, I will not be wasting a transfer on moving him out either. I think he could definitely bag in the City game. He could definitely bag in the Forest game. And, he very likely will bag in the West Ham game as well. So, I mean, he's even though he's not a buy, I personally won't be selling him just because of his production this season.
Yeah, I have got a situation where I own Isak and I'd actually be fine selling him for the next 4. The only reason that I'm probably not doing it is because I've got so much money tied up in him that it's probably not worth losing that, given that you'll definitely want him back in game week 30. From game week 30 onwards, the fixtures are really good. So you will definitely want him back, meaning that if you can keep him through the blank game week 29, then it's probably worth doing. Yeah.
Not least because they got Brentford and Leicester at the other side.
Exactly.
Which are 2 pretty great fixtures for an attacker. Mm-hmm. And then, so not much else to speak about. Mateta slipped down for similar reasons to Isak. Palace only have 4 games. But, those 4 games are great. Everton, Fulham, Villa, and then Ipswich. So, he's definitely not a sell during that time period. But, just be cautious about buying him because they do have that blank in 29. So yeah, that rounds out the forward segment. Let us know if there's anyone you think we missed. Let us know what you think of our lists, and we will see you again next week.
And that is all for this one. If you like the video, make sure you hit like, make sure you subscribe, make sure you check out ingenuityfantasy.com. All sorts of good stuff on there. As I mentioned, there's match stats from Opta. There is the articles from various different people about captaincy, differentials, etc. Transfer Wizard, the player rankings from today. So yeah, do make sure you check that out, and I'll see you in the next one.